My name is Sabrina, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm sitting in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, staring at my phone like it might explode. Just an hour ago, I got a call that changed everything. My husband Brandon's voice is still echoing in my head, that cruel laugh when he said, "I'm divorcing you and I've already sold the house." He sounded so smug, so certain he'd won. But there's something Brandon doesn't know yet. Something that's going to wipe that grin right off his face. And honestly, I almost feel sorry for him. Almost. Before I tell you what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you want to hear how this whole thing unfolded, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you won't believe what my husband didn't see coming. Let's get into it. I met Brandon 7 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue in Austin, Texas. It was one of those perfect September evenings, warm, but not too hot, with that golden light that makes everything look like a movie. I was 25, fresh out of grad school with my architecture degree, ready to take on the world. Brandon was 29, working in commercial real estate development, and he seemed to have his life together in a way that impressed me. We connected instantly over our shared love of mid-century modern design. While everyone else was drinking beer and playing cornhole, Brandon and I spent 2 hours talking about clean lines, open floor plans, and the genius of Frank Lloyd Wright. He actually listened when I talked about my career aspirations, my dreams of designing buildings that would outlast us both. He didn't do that thing some guys do where they nod politely, but you can tell they're not really paying attention. Our first date was ambitious. Brandon suggested we take a weekend trip to see Falling Water Wright's masterpiece, built over a waterfall in Pennsylvania. Who does that for a first date? It felt romantic, thoughtful, like he really understood me. We stood on that cantilevered terrace, surrounded by forest and the sound of rushing water, and I thought maybe I'd found someone special, someone who saw me, really saw me. Those first 6 months felt like a fairy tale. Brandon would show up at my tiny apartment with Thai food, and we'd spread blueprints across my living room floor. He'd look at my designs with what seemed like genuine admiration, tracing his finger along my sketches and saying things like, "You're going to be incredible. You're going to change skylines." I ate it up. Who wouldn't? He proposed exactly 1 year after that first date, took me back to Falling Water, and got down on one knee in the same spot where we'd stood that first time. The ring was simple, elegant, exactly what I would have chosen. I said yes without hesitation. I thought I knew him. I thought we wanted the same things. We got married 2 years into our relationship, a small ceremony in the hill country west of Austin. Rolling hills, wildflowers, an intimate gathering of 50 people who actually mattered to us. My parents were there beaming. My mum is a retired elementary school teacher, the kind who remembers every student's name decades later. My dad owns a small landscaping business he built from nothing. They worked hard their whole lives, taught me the value of earning what you have. They absolutely adored Brandon. He charmed them effortlessly, helping my dad set up chairs, complimenting my mum's dress, being the perfect son-in-law before he even was one. My younger brother Daniel was in the wedding party, standing up there in his rented tux, looking uncomfortable. Daniel's quieter than me, more cautious. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside and said, "You sure about this guy?" I laughed it off. "You're just being protective," I told him. "Brandon's great." Daniel didn't push it, but I remember the look in his eyes, like he wanted to say more, but didn't want to ruin my day. The first year of marriage was good. We lived in a rented apartment in downtown Austin, one of those converted warehouses with exposed brick and industrial windows. Both of us were working hard. I was at a mid-sized architecture firm, paying my dues on other people's projects, while dreaming of leading my own designs someday. Brandon was climbing the corporate ladder at his real estate development company, always talking about the next big deal, the next promotion. We had routines that made us feel like a real couple. Date nights every Friday, sometimes fancy restaurants, sometimes just tacos and a movie. Sunday mornings, we'd walk to the farmer's market, come home with fresh produce, and flowers make elaborate breakfasts together. We talked about the future constantly. Buying a house, starting a family someday, building something that would last. Brandon was always saying, our future, our dreams, our legacy. I felt secure, loved, seen. 3 years into our marriage, we decided it was time to buy a house. We'd been saving, or at least I had been. I'm meticulous about money, always have been. Every paycheck, a percentage, went straight into savings. I'd been doing that since my first job out of college. By the time we started house hunting, I had a substantial nest egg. Then there was the inheritance. My grandmother Helen passed away the year before we got married, and she left me $50,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was significant. She'd been a secretary her whole life, never made much, but she saved every penny she could. That money represented decades of her careful choices, her sacrifice. I cried when I found out, not just from grief, but from the weight of that gift. My parents wanted to help too. They gave us $30,000 toward a down payment money they'd been saving for years, specifically for this purpose. They could have used it for their own retirement, for travel, for a dozen other things. But they wanted to help me start my adult life right. It meant everything. Brandon's contribution was smaller, but he said not to worry about it. I'll cover the closing costs, he promised. My money's tied up in investments right now, but it'll balance out. I didn't question it. We were married. We were partners. His money, my money, it was all our money, right? We spent 4 months looking at houses, every weekend touring properties, imagining our lives in different spaces. Most of them were wrong. Too modern, too traditional, too expensive, too small. I was getting discouraged when our realtor showed us a place in South Austin that made my heart skip. It was a 1960s ranch-style house, 2,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a huge backyard with these massive oak trees that must have been 100 years old. The house itself was dated, needed work, but I could see past that. My architectural training kicked in immediately. I could see what it could become. The purchase price was $375,000, reasonable for Austin. The bones were good, the location was perfect, and I knew I could transform it into something special while preserving that mid-century character I loved. Brandon seemed excited too. He kept talking about hosting parties, about future kids playing in that backyard, about this being our forever home. We put in an offer that same day. It was accepted within 24 hours. Closing day was chaotic. I had a major client presentation scheduled, one I'd been preparing for weeks. It was my biggest project yet at the firm, a chance to prove I could handle significant responsibility. Brandon offered to handle the closing paperwork alone. "You focus on your career, babe," he said. "I've got this. It's my field anyway. Real estate is what I do." I was so grateful. He texted me photos from the title company, everything looking official and proper. I was in the middle of my presentation when the texts came through. Just glanced at them, long enough to see his smiling face holding keys. That evening after my presentation went well, and I was riding high on professional success, Brandon came home with a folder of documents. "Just need your signature on a few things," he said casually. I was exhausted, barely glanced at the pages as I signed where he pointed. We celebrated with champagne that night, toasting in our empty apartment. "To our house," Brandon said, raising his glass. "To our future." I clinked my glass against his, feeling like everything was falling into place. But there was something in his eyes I didn't catch then. A flicker of something I'd later recognize as calculation. We spent the next year living in the house and renovating it section by section. I designed every detail with the care I'd give a major architectural project. The kitchen came first. I opened it up, knocked down a wall to create flow between the cooking space and the living area, restored the original hardwood floors that had been hiding under terrible carpet. The bathrooms got completely updated with clean, modern fixtures that still nodded to the era of the house. I chose every tile, every paint colour, every light fixture. A lot of the work I did myself on weekends. Painting, tiling, the backsplash, refinishing cabinets, landscaping that huge backyard. My hands got blistered from sanding floors. My back ached from hauling materials. But watching my vision come to life was worth every minute of physical labour. I invested my entire remaining savings into those renovations. Another $40,000 of my own money, traceable to my accounts, documented in receipts I filed carefully. Brandon contributed minimally to the renovation costs. Whenever I asked about splitting expenses, he'd say, "My money's tied up in the market right now, but this house is our investment. It'll all even out in the end." I didn't push it. I was making our dream home, our sanctuary. I didn't mind being the one to fund it. Besides, he was my husband. We were building a life together. That's what marriage is, right? Compromise, partnership. Sometimes one person carries more weight for a while. Our neighbours started complimenting the transformation. The couple next door, an older pair who'd lived on the street for 30 years, would stop by with lemonade while I was working in the yard. "You're doing such beautiful work," the wife would say. "This house was an eyesore for years. You're bringing it back to life." A local design blog reached out, wanted to feature the renovation. They came and took photos, interviewed me about my design philosophy. The article went up, and suddenly people were driving by, slowly admiring the house from the street. I felt so proud. This house was my masterpiece, my love letter to architecture and to our marriage. But around year 5 of our marriage, things started shifting. Subtle at first, easy to dismiss as stress or temporary phases. Brandon started staying late at work more frequently. Monday nights turned into Monday and Wednesday nights. Then it was 3 or 4 nights a week. When he was home, he was distant. He'd sit on the couch, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up when I talked. Our Sunday morning farmers market routine faded away. Date nights became less frequent, then rare, then non-existent. He stopped asking about my work. I'd come home excited about a project and start to tell him about it, and he'd cut me off with, "That's nice, babe," before returning to his phone. Then the comments started, little digs that felt like paper cuts. "Still drawing houses, when are you going to make real money?" Or, "My buddy from college just made partner at his firm. What level are you at again?" Each comment alone was survivable, but they accumulated. I tried to dismiss it as stress from his job. He'd been passed over for a promotion twice in the past year. The second time really seemed to hit him hard. He came home that night and drank half a bottle of whiskey, something I'd never seen him do before. I tried to be supportive, cooked his favourite meals, gave him space when he seemed to need it, tried to initiate conversations about what he was feeling, but he'd just say, "I'm fine, stop hovering." Then there were the physical changes. Suddenly, he started going to the gym 5 days a week. He'd never been particularly focused on fitness before, but now he was obsessive about it. New cologne appeared on the bathroom counter, expensive designer stuff he'd never worn before. New clothes started showing up in his closet, trendier than his usual style. He was looking good, I'll admit that, but he wasn't dressing up for me. He started spending more time on his phone, and he'd angle it away from me whenever I was nearby. If I walked into a room while he was texting, he'd quickly switch apps or lock the screen. When I asked if everything was okay, he'd snap, "Why are you so paranoid? Can't I have any privacy?" The gaslighting started creeping in. He'd tell me about plans he'd supposedly mentioned, then act confused when I had no memory of it. "I definitely told you about this work dinner. You must have forgotten." But I hadn't forgotten. He'd never told me. "You're remembering wrong," became his favourite phrase whenever I questioned inconsistencies in his stories. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was too demanding, too needy, reading into things that weren't there. Maybe this was just what long-term marriage looked like, and I needed to adjust my expectations. 6 months before that phone call that changed everything, things deteriorated rapidly. Brandon was barely home. He'd leave early, come home late, claim he was working on a massive project that required all his attention. I was deep into my own work too, leading the design on a major commercial building, so I was distracted. Easier to believe his excuses when I was exhausted from my own long days. Our sex life had become non-existent. We barely touched, barely talked beyond surface-level logistics. Can you pick up milk? I'll be home late. Did you pay the electric bill? I suggested couples therapy. We were sitting at the kitchen table on a rare evening when we were both home, and I said, "Brandon, I think we need help. We're not connecting anymore. Maybe talking to someone could help us find our way back to each other." His reaction was immediate and harsh. "We're fine. You're overreacting. We don't need some stranger picking apart our marriage. This is normal. All couples go through phases." I tried to push back, but he shut down completely. Left the room, didn't speak to me for 2 days. My brother Daniel visited one afternoon while Brandon was at work. We were sitting in the backyard, the one I'd worked so hard to make beautiful, and he looked at me with concern. "Sabrina, are you okay? You seem stressed. Is he treating you right?" I immediately jumped to Brandon's defense. "We're fine. Just busy with work. Marriage is hard sometimes, you know." But Daniel shook his head. "Marriage is hard, yeah, but it shouldn't make you look like you're carrying the weight of the world. You seem smaller than you used to. Quieter." His words planted seeds of doubt that I couldn't quite shake. I started noticing more things. Credit card statements with charges I didn't recognize. Restaurant receipts for 2 at places we'd never been together on nights he'd claimed to be working late alone. A woman's earring in his car, small and silver, definitely not mine. When I asked about it, he barely looked up from his phone. "Oh, that's probably from one of my colleagues. We've been carpooling to save gas." The explanation was reasonable enough, but my gut said otherwise. Every explanation on its own seemed plausible. Collectively, they painted a picture I didn't want to see. I was the frog in boiling water, the temperature rising so gradually I didn't realize I was being cooked alive. 3 months before the phone call, I decided I couldn't live in denial anymore. I needed to address it directly, lay everything out, and see if we could salvage what we'd built. I prepared for the conversation like I'd prepare for a client presentation, calm, rational, focused on I feel statements rather than accusations. I picked a Saturday morning, made his favorite breakfast, sat down across from him at the table we'd chosen together years ago. "Brandon," I said, my voice steady, "I feel like we're drifting apart. I miss you. I miss us. Can we talk about what's happening?" I expected resistance, but not the explosion that came. His face turned red. He slammed his coffee mug down so hard I thought it might shatter. "Here we go again. You and your feelings. You and your need to talk everything to death." I sat there stunned as he unloaded on me. "I'm working my arse off for us, for this house, for our future, and all you do is nag me. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to come home to your constant questions? Where was I? Who was I with? What was I doing? I can't breathe in this house anymore." The cruelty in his voice was something I'd never heard before. This wasn't my husband. This was a stranger wearing his face. He stormed out of the house before I could respond, tires screeching as he drove away. He didn't come home that night. I called and texted, got no response. Finally, around noon the next day, a text came through. "Staying at Dave's. Need space from your accusations." Dave was a work friend I'd met once. I had no reason to doubt the message, but something felt off. I cried all night, questioned everything about myself. Was I too demanding, too needy? Was I suffocating him with my expectations of basic communication and honesty? Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was broken, somehow, incapable of accepting that marriage required giving your partner freedom. My mother had always said marriage was about compromise. Was I compromising enough? When she called to check in that weekend, I lied. "Everything's fine, Mum. Just busy season at work for both of us." Pride prevented me from admitting my marriage was crumbling. Admitting it would make it real, and I wasn't ready for that reality yet. Brandon came home Sunday evening like nothing had happened. Walked in, grabbed a beer from the fridge, turned on a basketball game. I tried to talk to him about what had happened, about his outburst, but he waved me off. I was stressed. You pushed me. Let's just move on. And because I was desperate to believe we could be okay, I let it go. We existed in this tense politeness for the next several weeks. Roommates, not partners. Strangers, not spouses. Then 2 months before the phone call, the truth started forcing its way to the surface. I was working from home one afternoon, sketching revisions on a project at the kitchen table. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone considered ignoring it, but something made me answer. A woman stood on my porch. She was beautiful. Late 20s, professionally dressed, dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Is Brandon home?" she asked. My stomach dropped before I even knew why. "No, he's at work. Can I help you with something?" The woman's face shifted through several emotions in quick succession: confusion, realization, pity. That last one made my skin crawl. "Oh, God," she said quietly. "You don't know, do you?" My hands started shaking. "Know what?" She introduced herself as Jessica. We stood there on my porch, and she told me everything. They'd met at a real estate conference 8 months ago. Brandon had pursued her aggressively, charmed her, told her he was divorced, showed her photos of his house. This house, the one I'd designed and renovated with my own hands, told her he'd designed and built it himself. Jessica had been here before, when I was traveling for a work conference. Brandon had given her the grand tour of my home, claiming credit for my work. I invited her inside because I needed to know everything. We sat in my living room and she showed me her phone, text messages between her and Brandon. Flirty at first, then intimate, then explicit. Photos he'd sent her, some taken in our bedroom. My stomach turned. She scrolled through months of evidence. Dinner dates. Weekend getaways when he'd told me he was at work conferences. He'd built an entire relationship with this woman, and she'd had no idea he was married. "I would never knowingly date a married man," Jessica said, and I believed her. Her distress was genuine. She'd been lied to, just like I had. "I'm so sorry. When I realized he was still married, I had to come here. You deserve to know the truth." After she left, I sat alone in my house, the house I'd built, and felt my marriage shatter around me. But along with the grief and anger came something else: clarity. I didn't confront Brandon that evening when he came home. Some instinct told me to be strategic, to think clearly, to protect myself before making any moves. He walked in, whistling in a good mood, kissed my cheek like everything was normal. "How was your day, babe?" I forced a smile. "Fine, busy at work." He grabbed a beer and settled onto the couch. I watched him from the kitchen, this man I'd loved, and saw a stranger. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything. I'd learned Brandon's phone password months ago, back when we still had some semblance of trust. He'd never changed it. Late at night, while he slept, I'd screenshot his text messages. Multiple women, not just Jessica. A pattern of lies, manipulations, betrayals that went back at least 2 years. I photographed credit card statements showing hotel rooms, jewelry purchases, expensive dinners at romantic restaurants on nights he'd told me he was working late. I was meticulous, organized, treating it like a project. Because that's what it was. A project to protect myself, to build an escape route, to ensure I wouldn't be left with nothing when this inevitably exploded. I contacted a divorce attorney based on a recommendation from a colleague who'd been through a messy split. Patricia Morrison had a reputation for being sharp, thorough, and expensive. Her initial consultation fee alone was $500, but I needed the best. We met in her downtown office, and I laid out the entire situation, the affair, the lies, the evidence I'd collected. Patricia listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, her first question caught me off guard. "Who's on the house title?" I blinked. "Both of us, I assume. We bought it together." Patricia's expression didn't change. You assume or you know for certain. I realized with growing dread that I didn't actually know. Brandon handled the closing. I signed papers that evening, but I was exhausted and didn't really review them closely. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Sabrina, I need you to bring me all the closing documents. Every single page from the purchase. This is critical. The way she said it made my heart race. Why? What are you thinking? She shook her head. Let's not speculate until we see the paperwork, but get me those documents as soon as possible. I went home that afternoon while Brandon was at work and searched his home office. He kept files meticulously organized, and I found the folder marked House Purchase easily. Thick stack of papers, most of which I'd never actually read. I made copies of everything, kept the originals exactly where I'd found them, so he wouldn't know I'd been looking. Called Patricia's office and scheduled a follow-up appointment for 3 days later. Those 3 days felt like 3 years. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on work, couldn't stop thinking about what might be in those documents. Brandon noticed I was off, asked if I was feeling okay. Just tired, I told him. Big deadline at work. He accepted the lie easily because he wasn't really paying attention anyway. The follow-up meeting with Patricia Morrison changed everything. I sat across from her in that same office, watched as she carefully reviewed each page of the closing documents. Her face remained neutral, professionally composed, but I saw her eyebrows raise slightly as she flipped through the paperwork. Finally, she looked up at me. Sabrina, according to these documents, the house is solely in your name. The words didn't make sense at first. I shook my head. That can't be right. Brandon handled everything. We bought it together. It's our house. Patricia turned the deed around so I could see it pointed to the relevant line. The deed shows only your name, Sabrina Jane Morrison. No other names appear on the title. I stared at the document, my legal name printed there alone. But why? How? Patricia started explaining and pieces clicked into place. The down payment came from where she asked. I listed it off. My grandmother's inheritance, $50,000, my parents' gift, $30,000, my personal savings, about $40,000 I'd saved from working. Patricia nodded. All traceable to your accounts. I thought about it. Yes, everything came from my personal checking and savings accounts. She flipped through more paperwork. And the mortgage. I felt dizzy. In my name, just my name. Payments come from my account automatically. Patricia pulled out another document. Brandon's contribution to the closing costs was $4,800. That's it. The room felt like it was spinning. I don't understand. Why would he put it only in my name? Patricia's expression softened slightly. There could be several reasons. Maybe he planned to add himself later and never did. Maybe he thought being married meant you were automatically co-owners. Or maybe the title company required it to be in your name since all the funds came from your accounts. Did you know the house was solely in your name? No, he always called it our house. He made decisions about it like he owned it too. I thought we were equal owners. Patricia made a note. This actually works enormously in your favor. Texas is a community property state, which usually means assets acquired during marriage are jointly owned. But there are exceptions. Separate property obtained before marriage or through inheritance remains separate property. She continued speaking slowly to make sure I understood. Your grandmother's inheritance was separate property. Your parents' gift was separate property. Your savings from before the marriage were separate property. The house was purchased entirely with separate property. Therefore, the house remains your separate property. The mortgage is in your name. You've made every payment. You funded all the renovations. Legally, Brandon has no claim to this property. I sat there trying to process what this meant. He doesn't own any part of the house. Patricia shook her head. Not legally, no. Now, in a divorce, he could try to claim that the house became community property through some argument, but given the clear paper trail showing all funds came from your separate accounts, that claim would be weak. Very weak. A thought occurred to me. Patricia, what if he tries to sell the house? She looked up sharply. He can't sell property he doesn't own. If he attempted to do so, that would be fraud. Why do you ask? I shrugged, trying to seem casual. Just wondering about worst-case scenarios. But something in my gut was already warning me. We spent another hour going over strategy. Patricia advised me to open a separate bank account, start transferring funds to protect my assets, make copies of all important documents, change passwords on personal accounts, and most importantly, let him make the first move. Don't tip your hand about what you know regarding the affair or the house ownership. When he reveals his plan, we'll be ready. I agreed, though waiting felt like torture. I opened a new account at a different bank, started moving money in small amounts so it wouldn't show up obviously on our joint statements, made copies of everything important, marriage certificate, tax returns, insurance policies, car titles, changed all my passwords to things Brandon would never guess, prepared for war while pretending everything was fine. Living with him during those weeks was surreal. He continued his affair, probably started new ones, came home and acted like a devoted husband when it suited him. I played my role perfectly. The oblivious wife, trusting and naive. But inside I was preparing, documenting, planning, waiting for him to show his hand. Tuesday afternoon, I was at my office reviewing blueprints for a mixed-use development project when my phone rang, Brandon's name on the screen. He rarely called during workday, and my heart started racing before I even answered. Hey, what's up? I tried to sound normal, casual. The voice that came through the speaker was cold, clinical, stripped of any warmth. Sabrina, I'm going to make this quick because I have a meeting in 10 minutes. I'm done. I want a divorce. My hand gripped the phone tighter. I'd known this was coming, had prepared for it, but hearing the words still felt like a punch to the gut. What? Brandon, can we talk about this in person? This seems like something we should discuss face to face. His laugh was cruel, mocking. There's nothing to discuss. I've met someone else, someone who actually appreciates me, someone who doesn't nag me constantly or make me feel like I'm never enough. Someone exciting, successful, interesting. Everything you're not. Each word was designed to hurt, and they hit their targets. But I bit my tongue, let him keep talking. Here's the thing, he continued, and I could hear the smugness in his voice. I've already got everything figured out. You don't need to worry about any of the details. I'm keeping the house. Actually, I've already sold it. The words hung in the air. You what? My voice came out sharper than I'd intended. I found a buyer. We're closing in 3 weeks. Cash offer, $450,000. That's $75,000 profit from what we paid. Not bad for 5 years, right? I'll give you half of the profit if you sign the divorce papers quickly and don't make this difficult. $37,500. That's more than fair considering how little you actually contributed to the house. His laughter echoed through the phone, triumphant, victorious. He thought he'd won, thought he'd outsmarted me, outmaneuvered me, left me with no options. You have 1 week to pack your things and move out. Find an apartment, go stay with your parents. I don't really care. Just be out by next Tuesday. It's over, Sabrina. Finally. I let the silence stretch for a moment, collecting myself, making sure my voice would be steady. Brandon, I have a question. He sighed, impatient. What? Still so smug, so certain. Did you actually look at the title documents recently, like closely? There was a pause. Of course I did. I handled the whole purchase, remember. The house is in my name. Or our names. Whatever. It doesn't matter. We're married, so it's community property anyway. Really, you're absolutely sure about that? Annoyance crept into his voice. Yes, I'm sure. Why are you asking stupid questions? This doesn't change anything. I took a breath, felt a strange calm settle over me. Because I'm looking at the deed right now, Brandon. The The certified copy I requested from the county clerk last week. And that's interesting because the only name on this deed is mine, Sabrina Jane Morrison. Just me, no Brandon, no co-owner, just my name. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then stammering, "That's not possible, you're lying, you're making that up to confuse things." My voice remained steady, almost gentle. "Am I? Tell me, Brandon, when you went to close this sale, you claim you made what exactly happened?" More silence. "I haven't actually gone to closing yet, but they accepted my offer. The contract is signed. The paperwork is in process." "Let me guess," I said. "You signed a sales contract claiming to be the owner. Did you forge my signature too, or did you just hope no one would check the actual title before closing?" His voice changed, panic edging in. "I don't know what game you're playing, but the house is half mine. We're married, community property. You can't just claim the whole thing. Actually, Brandon, Texas community property law doesn't work quite the way you think it does. The house was purchased entirely with my separate property, my inheritance from Grandma Helen, the money my parents gifted us, my savings from before we were married. You contributed less than $5,000 to closing costs. That's it. That's your entire financial contribution to this house." I kept going, gaining momentum. "The mortgage is in my name, only my name. I've made every single payment from my account for 5 years. I paid for all the renovations. Every penny of that $40,000 came from my accounts. I have receipts for everything, bank statements showing every withdrawal, every payment, every purchase." His breathing was audible now, fast and shallow. "You want to know the really funny part?" I asked. "When you handled the closing, you put the house solely in my name. Maybe you planned to add yourself later and never got around to it. Maybe you thought being married automatically made you a co-owner. Or maybe you actually tried to put it in your name and the title company caught that all the funds came from my accounts. Either way, the result is the same." My voice hardened. "The house is mine, Brandon. Legally, completely, exclusively mine. You have no ownership stake. None." His voice rose, desperate now. "That's bullshit. I've lived there for 5 years. I have rights. You can't just kick me out. Actually, I can. You're a tenant at best, and I want you out. Out of my house, out of my life." He was almost shouting now. "You can't kick me out of my own house." The satisfaction in my response was undeniable. "It's not your house, it never was. And that sale you arranged, that's fraud, Brandon. You attempted to sell property you don't own. You likely forged my signature on sales documents. That's a felony in Texas. Multiple felonies, actually." The panic in his voice was clear now. "Now wait. Wait, let's not do anything rash here. We can figure this out. We don't need lawyers or police involved. We can handle this between us like adults." Too late for that. Way too late for that. My attorney already has all the documentation, every single piece of evidence. And Brandon, I know about Jessica. And whoever else you've been seeing, I have screenshots of your messages, credit card receipts, photos, everything. So here's what's going to happen. You have 1 week to move out of my house, pack your personal belongings, and nothing else. I've already changed the locks. Your key won't work when you get home today. My attorney will contact you about the divorce. Don't expect a penny from me, and if you go through with that fraudulent sale, I will press charges. Criminal charges. Do you understand me? He was sputtering now, words tumbling over each other. "You can't do this to me. This is insane. You're being vindictive. We can work this out. One last thing. Watch me. Oh, and Brandon, that buyer you found, you should probably tell them the truth before they sue you too. Fraud claims can get expensive." I hung up. I sat at my desk, hands shaking with adrenaline, staring at my phone like I couldn't believe what had just happened. My colleague Amanda rushed over from her cubicle. "Sabrina, are you okay? You're white as a sheet." I looked up at her. "I just told my husband I'm divorcing him and kicking him out of the house." Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God, do you want to get out of here? Get some air." We went to the coffee shop across the street. I told her everything. The affair, the lies, his attempt to sell my house, the conversation that just happened. Amanda listened with her mouth hanging open, occasionally interjecting with, "No way," and "Are you kidding me?" When I finished, she shook her head in disbelief. "He tried to sell your house that you paid for. The audacity, the absolute audacity." "I know," I said, feeling the emotions start to hit, now that the adrenaline was fading. Anger, relief, sadness, vindication, all swirling together. My phone kept buzzing, text after text from Brandon. I pulled it out, showed Amanda, the messages rolling in. "You're making a huge mistake. We can work this out. Don't do this to us. I love you. Please, let's talk about this." Then the tone shifted. "You'll regret this. You can't just steal my house. I'll fight you on everything. You're going to be sorry." I forwarded every message to Patricia. Her response came back immediately. "Perfect. He's giving us evidence. Keep it coming. Don't respond." I showed Amanda, who grinned. "I like your lawyer." I blocked Brandon's number, felt immediately lighter. Amanda squeezed my hand. "You're going to be okay. Better than okay. You're going to be free." I wanted to believe her. Part of me did, but another part was terrified of what came next. I left work early, drove home before Brandon would get there. I'd arranged for Daniel and 2 of my close friends to be at the house just in case things got ugly. The locksmith had come that morning and changed all the locks. New keys, new deadbolts, new garage door code. Brandon's key was useless now. He arrived at 6 p.m. I watched from the window as he tried his key, confusion crossing his face when it wouldn't turn. He tried again, then started banging on the door. "Sabrina, open this door right now." I opened it with the chain lock engaged just a few inches. "Your things are packed. They're in the garage." His face cycled through emotions. Shock, rage, disbelief. "You can't kick me out. This is my home." Daniel appeared behind me, tall and imposing. "Actually, she can. It's her house. You're trespassing if you don't leave voluntarily." Brandon's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell do you think you are telling me what to do?" Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "I'm the brother who never trusted you. Turns out my instincts were right." Brandon tried to push past us, shoulder against the door. "Let me in. This is my house. I have a right to be here." I kept to my voice steady. "No, you don't. I have the police on speed dial. You can leave now with your dignity, or you can leave in handcuffs. Your choice." He saw something in my face, realized I wasn't bluffing. "Fine, but this isn't over. My attorney is going to destroy you in court. You'll lose everything. Your attorney can contact mine, Patricia Morrison at Morrison and Associates." I watched his face pale. Everyone in real estate circles knew Patricia Morrison's reputation. She was legendary expensive, and she didn't lose. "You hired Morrison?" His voice cracked slightly. "I did. She has all the documentation, every receipt, every bank statement, every piece of evidence showing that house is mine alone." He grabbed the boxes I'd packed from the garage, loaded them into his car with jerky, angry movements. Before driving away, he tried one more time. "Sabrina, please, we can fix this. I made mistakes, but we can work through them. Don't throw away 7 years." I looked at him, this man I'd loved, this stranger who'd betrayed me. "The only mistake I made was trusting you. Goodbye, Brandon." I watched his taillights disappear down the street. Daniel put his arm around my shoulders. "You did good, sis. I'm proud of you." We went back inside my house that was truly mine now, and I closed the door on that chapter of my life. My friends stayed late, ordered pizza, kept me company, so I wouldn't be alone that first night. But eventually they left, and I was alone in the house. It felt different, emptier, but somehow lighter. Brandon hired an attorney within days. Gerald Hopkins, a mediocre lawyer known for taking cases other attorneys wouldn't touch. Gerald filed divorce papers claiming Brandon was entitled to half the house value, citing community property laws. Patricia demolished the claim in her response with surgical precision. She provided the deed showing sole ownership in my name. bank statements proving all funds came from my separate property accounts, documentation of the inheritance, my parents' gift, my premarital savings, receipts for every renovation expense, all from my accounts. Gerald tried to argue that the house became community property through some convoluted logic about improvements made during the marriage. Patricia cited specific sections of Texas Family Code provided case law precedent, made it clear that separate property remains separate, regardless of when improvements are made, if those improvements are funded by separate property. She included a timeline showing the purchase was completed before significant commingling of assets, that the mortgage had always been solely in my name, that I'd made every payment. After reviewing Patricia's response, Gerald advised Brandon to drop the property claim entirely. He had no legal standing, and pursuing it would only rack up attorney fees he'd have to pay with no chance of winning. The focus shifted to a quick, uncontested divorce. Brandon wanted out fast, probably to avoid further embarrassment, or maybe because he'd already moved on to his next victim. Negotiations took 6 weeks. The final terms were clean. No spousal support in either direction. Each of us kept our separate property. Brandon got his car, his personal belongings, his retirement account. I kept the house, my car, my retirement account. Everything divided neatly along lines that already existed. The part that must have killed him was signing the affidavit, admitting he had no ownership claim to the property. Black and white, legally binding, acknowledging that the house at 4782 Oakmont Drive was solely owned by Sabrina Jane Morrison, and that he had no past, present, or future claim to it. He had to sign it in front of a notary. I wasn't there, but Patricia told me his hand shook. He also had to send a written apology to the buyers he'd tried to defraud. They'd been understanding once they learned the truth, chose not to pursue legal action, but they wanted acknowledgement of the deception. Brandon's apology was brief and clearly written by his attorney, but it existed, documented proof of his attempted fraud. The divorce was finalized 3 months after that phone call. 3 months from "I'm divorcing you and I've already sold the house" to official dissolution of marriage. I felt relief more than anything. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but relief. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. The first few weeks alone were harder than I'd expected. The house felt too big, too quiet. Every room held memories, and I had to decide which ones to keep and which ones to release. The couch where we'd watched movies, the kitchen where he used to make me coffee, the bedroom we'd shared. All of it was tainted now, but it was also mine. I could reclaim it, redefine it, make it into something new. I questioned everything about myself during those early weeks. How had I been so blind, so trusting? Had I ignored red flags because I wanted the fairy tale so badly? Was I fundamentally broken in some way that I'd chosen someone capable of such betrayal? The thoughts circled endlessly, especially at 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come. Therapy helped. I found a counselor who specialized in betrayal trauma, saw her twice a week. She helped me understand that Brandon's behavior wasn't my fault. That I'd loved authentically and honestly, while he'd loved conditionally, transactionally, or maybe not at all. She taught me to recognize the gaslighting for what it was, the way he'd systematically undermined my confidence and reality. Manipulation that had been so gradual, I hadn't seen it happening. I learned that I wasn't stupid or blind. I was human. I'd trusted my husband because that's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. The failure wasn't in my trusting. The failure was in his being unworthy of that trust. Slowly, I started reclaiming my space. I repainted the bedroom a soft sage green that felt peaceful, bought new bedding, nothing that reminded me of him, rearranged furniture, changed the energy of the rooms, planted a vegetable garden in the backyard, something I'd always wanted, but Brandon had said was too much work. Tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, herbs. I spent weekends with my hands in the soil, nurturing things that would grow. I adopted a rescue dog, a 3-year-old golden retriever named Sunny. She'd been found abandoned on the side of a highway, scared and alone. When I met her at the shelter, she looked at me with these soulful eyes, and I knew we were meant to find each other, two abandoned souls helping each other heal. She followed me from room to room, slept at the foot of my bed, reminded me I wasn't alone. My family was incredible. My parents visited often, never saying I told you so, even though they must have had doubts about Brandon. My mum would bring food, sit with me in the kitchen, let me cry or rant or sit in silence. My dad fixed things around the house, small repairs I'd been putting off. Daniel came over most weekends, helped with yard work, took me out for tacos and movies, reminded me how to laugh. Friends rallied around me. Amanda from work organised a girls' night every Friday. We'd rotate houses, cook dinner, drink wine, watch terrible reality TV. They let me process at my own pace, never pushed me to get over it or move on before I was ready. Just sat with me in my grief and slowly helped me find my way back to joy. 3 months post-divorce, I started feeling like myself again, not the self I'd been during marriage, that diminished version who'd learned to make herself smaller to accommodate Brandon's ego, but my real self, the woman who'd graduated top of her architecture program, who'd designed beautiful buildings, who was strong and capable, and didn't need anyone's validation. Work became a refuge and a source of pride. I threw myself into projects and my efforts paid off. I earned a promotion to senior architect, a role I'd been working toward for years. Got assigned as lead designer on a major downtown mixed-use development, the kind of project that could define a career. My design was innovative, sustainable, beautiful. The client loved it. My bosses praised it. I was finally getting the recognition I deserved. The house won awards. A local architecture magazine featured it in their annual Best Renovations issue. The photos were gorgeous, showing every detail I'd laboured over. The article credited me alone, my vision, my work. Redemption in print. I framed that article, hung it in my office as a reminder of what I could accomplish. I started dating casually after about 6 months. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and dinners, reminding myself what it felt like to be treated with respect, to have someone listen when I talked, to split the check without resentment, to be seen as valuable, interesting, worthy of effort. I learned what I would and wouldn't accept in relationships. My boundaries became sacred and non-negotiable. I joined a support group for divorced women, met others navigating similar pain, heard stories worse than mine, stories better than mine, realized betrayal was unfortunately common, but so was survival, so was resilience, so was rebirth. We were all phoenixes rising from the ashes of failed marriages, and there was power in that shared experience. 6 months post-divorce. I felt strong again. Not just surviving, but thriving. I was sleeping better, laughing, more dreaming about the future instead of drowning in the past. Sunny and I would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset through the oak trees, and I'd feel grateful. Grateful for the pain that taught me, grateful for the strength I'd found, grateful for the life I was rebuilding. 1 year after that phone call, I took stock of everything, what I'd learned, who I'd become, where I was going. I'd learned to trust my instincts because they're usually right. When something feels off, it probably is. I'd learned that financial independence isn't just smart, it's essential. Knowing what you own, what you're signing, where your money goes, these things matter. They can save you. I'd learned that love shouldn't make you smaller. Real love should help you grow, should celebrate your success, should support your dreams. Brandon's version of love was about control, about keeping me uncertain and dependent. That wasn't love. That was manipulation. I'd learned that I could survive things I thought would break me. When Brandon made that call, when my marriage exploded, I thought I might not make it through. But I did. I survived. And more than that, I built something better from the rubble. The house stopped being a symbol of broken dreams and became a symbol of my strength, my resilience, my new beginning. I'd built it with my own hands and vision, Brandon had tried to take it, had tried to claim it as his own, had tried to sell it out from under me, but he'd failed. The house was mine, legally and spiritually. Every wall I'd painted, every floor I'd refinished, every garden I'd planted was a testament to my ability to create beauty, even in difficult circumstances. I heard through mutual friends that Brandon had moved to Dallas, was engaged to someone new, some poor woman who didn't know what she was getting into yet. I felt pity more than anger. He'd never find happiness because he didn't know how to value what he had. He'd keep chasing the next thing, the next high, the next conquest, never satisfied, never content, never at peace. I wished him nothing, not happiness, not misery, just nothing. My energy was better spent on my own life, my own growth, my own future. He'd taken enough from me. I wasn't giving him one more moment of my time or attention. One evening, a year and a half after the divorce, I was sitting on my back porch with Sunny at my feet. The sun was setting through the oak trees, painting everything gold and amber. I had a glass of wine in my hand, a new architecture project spread out on the table beside me. The garden was flourishing tomatoes heavy on the vine. The house behind me was beautiful, peaceful, completely mine. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Contentment. Not the fragile, conditional contentment of my marriage, always one wrong word away from shattering, but deep, bone-level contentment. Gratitude for the journey, even the painful parts. Pride in who I'd become, excitement for what came next. The house wasn't just walls and a roof and carefully chosen paint colours. It was proof that I could weather any storm, that I could be broken down and build myself back stronger, that I owned my life, my choices, my future. Brandon's laughter from that phone call seemed like a distant memory, now faded and powerless, because in the end, the last laugh was mine, and honestly, I was just getting started. So, if you've made it this far in my story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone try to take credit for your work, your success, your accomplishments? Have you ever trusted someone completely only to discover they didn't deserve that trust? Drop a comment below and share your story. You're not alone in this. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own strength or gave you hope during a difficult time, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories. Share this with someone who might need to hear it, someone who's struggling to find their way through betrayal or heartbreak. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, for taking the time to hear about my journey from devastation to reclamation. I hope it reminds you that you're stronger than you think, that you can survive things that feel impossible, that the life you build for yourself, the one you create with your own hands and choices, is more valuable than any relationship built on lies. Take care of yourselves, protect your hearts, but don't close them. Trust your instincts, know your worth. And remember that sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is leave, because it creates space for you to become who you were always meant to be.